Hello everyone and welcome back to Archaeo SMP Season 2. Oh goodness, hold on. We gotta... something changed. Hello everyone and welcome back to Archaeo SMP Season 2. It's been a while since I made a video. I have 7 chronic illnesses. A whole 7 of them. It took me a while to convince my body that chronic illnesses aren't Pokemon and we really didn't need to catch them all. I mean, obviously that's not how chronic illnesses work, but you get the gist. Basically, I've got 7 chronic illnesses and they all conspired against me for the entire month of November. But it's December now and hopefully we're back at least a little bit. We're gonna see if this episode is a lot of time lapses and me talking over them. I mean, a lot of my episodes are time lapses and me talking over them, but if there's a lot fewer like moments like this where I'm talking to camera, blame the chronic illnesses. Okay, so I just realized, you can tell I'm ill because I just recorded a whole bit, or at least I thought I recorded a whole bit, and it turned out that I wasn't recording. So filming this episode is gonna be interesting. It might, So today, what I would like to do, I know that we said, or that I said in the last episode that we were going to start building Neolithic stuff in Scotland, and we definitely are, just not right this minute, because with the entirety of November taken away from me, I need a little bit more time to, not to research like the designs for the Neolithic builds, but to figure out how I want to build them in Minecraft, because it can be a little bit difficult to represent things at that scale in Minecraft. So I'm going to take a little bit of time, probably maybe over the holiday break, sort of, to figure out how to do that. But for right now, I want to build like a farmer's market on the server, and I want to get a bunch of ingredients together and just make a farmer's market at spawn. So I've already got the mushrooms, I've already got the honey, but I do kind of want to get some... Oh, this is dangerous. I should make... Well, that's a future ArchaeoPlays problem. So I want to build a farmer's market and get some like ingredients going. But in order to get ingredients going, I kind of need more farms. And also villagers. They would help in terms of getting like wheat and beetroot and carrots. I mean, I've got my tiny patch of crops, but it would be helpful to have villagers. So we're going to go on a quest today for villagers, and I might regret it. But we're gonna give it a go, especially because I keep saying that we need to have like a town where I am, because the Sheelings are up on the hill and you need a town below the Sheelings. Generally there's a town or at least a village below the Sheelings, and I have my building and I've got a storage building. There's not much in the way of town happening at the moment. I don't know if you're aware, but as I run into the roof, I am in the middle of spruce taiga, surrounded by dark oak forest, which are perfect biomes for finding villagers. There are no villages that spawn in these biomes. They just don't. The spruce taiga, I mean, you can get like, you can get spruce villages, but I don't have any, and I'm not entirely sure they spawn in old growth taiga. Maybe they do, I'm not sure. But this goes for a while. Like, it's a big forest. So we're gonna need to make use of some leads and some boats and hopefully fly some villagers safely this direction. Okay, let's go sleep before I spawn creepers. And then we'll gather some materials for this build. Okay, so it turns out that I had most things in my storage. I've got a couple shulker boxes, oh, that one and this one, with the materials that I want. And there are a few things, however, that I do not have. So we're gonna go to spawn. And I love Triskalia. It makes me happy. We're gonna go to spawn and see what we can find at spawn. It looks like we do have mail. It may be cookies. It may be other stuff. Let's see. It's cookies! Yay! This is my lunchbox. It's where I keep all the food Sugar cookies, questionable cookies. I'm gonna... Oh, because those are glazed carrots. But these are... Wait. Glazed carrots. I see. Okay, alright, well that's fine. Then we shall put that back. So, okay. The first thing I need is packed mud. And we have the Geodojo. And the Geodojo is basically it's a place where you can make stone or deep slate, or not deep slate, basalt. So like mud, insert dirt. Okay, so if I've got dirt, I need packed mud. Okay, so if I do that, see, and it just pushes it along. Oh, that didn't work. There it is. Okay, all right. I think I just picked up the bottle and it got confused. But anyway, so this lets you make mud automatically. You just have to stand a little bit far back so that you don't accidentally pick up the water bottle, which is a thing with mud machines or mud farms. You just have to be careful not to pick up the water bottle that's turning the dirt to mud. But basically, I can sit here and turn all this to mud. And then as we go, here, I'll show you once I'm, okay, all right, well, that should be enough. Okay, so then you can see where it was kind of messing up a bit here, but that's fine. And over here. But it goes along the ceiling, and then you can just dig it off the ceiling. That's that. Isn't that cool? That's really helpful. Now we've got a whole bunch of mud for packed mud, which is good because I need about 40 packed mud. That actually didn't take all that long. I already had most of the materials in my storage system, so all I really had to do, I mean, I had a lot of iron. The main thing that I needed to do though was mine for gold for the powered rails, but that was basically it, and then a little bit of mangrove harvesting. I've also got loads of seeds. I'm going to be using a bunch of seeds in this build. I still need some beetroot seeds, but we're just gonna let them grow as we build. So let's get into a time lapse. Let's start with a crop that's native to Scotland. Wild carrots are native to Europe and southwestern Asia, so they're all over Scotland. But when it was first cultivated, or when it was first grown by people, like intentionally grown, it was actually grown for its leaves instead of its roots, at least as far as we can tell. The first historical mention of using the root in Europe was in the 1st century CE, but wild carrots are documented from thousands of years ago, so that's at least a few millennia where humans might have been growing carrots just for the tops and not for the root. The word carrot in English was first recorded in 1530, but it is an old word. So the English word comes from Middle French, which comes from late Latin, which comes from ancient Greek, and that probably comes from an even older set of languages that have since been lost to time. So why did it take so long for us to get the word carrot in English? Because ancient carrots weren't orange. Okay, this seems tangential, but roll with me here. Right. Ancient carrots weren't orange, generally speaking. They were actually purple or white. And in many places in the English-speaking world, carrots and parsnips were called the same thing for a really long time. Which is why we don't have the word carrot in English recorded until 1530. In the medieval period, in English, carrots and parsnips, generally the same thing. Orange varieties of carrots did exist by at least 512 CE, but it's not super clear that they were the bright orange of carrots that we know today until around the 18th century. There's a bit of a myth or a rumour that the Dutch bred the bright orange carrots we all know and love to show support for William of Orange, but the evidence for that is a bit dubious at best, so it's a lot more likely that Europeans in general preferred the orange varieties because they're a brighter colour that doesn't brown in soups and stews in the way that the purple and the white varieties do. So it just adds a bit more colour to your dish even when it's a soup or a stew. Carrots are obviously great for eating, but have you ever heard of carrot alcohol? In the late 17th century, folks on the Isle of Harris here in Scotland were using the seeds of wild carrots to brew alcohol rather than hops. And speaking of the Outer Hebrides, so islands in Scotland that are far out to the northwest, like Lewis and Harris, Barra, Benbecula, North Uist, South Uist, etc., young women used to actually give wild carrots to the men after the St. Michael's Day races, and giving carrots to someone was often a way to tell someone that you fancied them. There's a lot of, you may have noticed, between the Samhain video and this one, there's a lot of stuff about giving stuff to people to tell them that you fancy them. You know, apparently we've got priorities in Scottish folk traditions. Also in the Outer Hebrides, finding a forked carrot, or something that looks like two carrots joined together, that was seen as good luck. And there's even several, well, there's at least one rhyme, there may be several. This rhyme is in Gaelic, or Scottish Gaelic, and because I do not speak that language, and I do not trust my ability to find pronunciation, well, I tried to find somebody saying the rhyme, but I couldn't, and looking up how to pronounce letter combinations in Gaelic gets complicated. I don't trust myself to pronounce this correctly, so I've just put the text on the screen, but for anyone who can't see the screen for whatever reason, I've also put the text down in the description below. Basically, it's a rhyme about how joyful and wonderful it is to find a forked carrot, and the hope that the joy of the carrot and finding it passes on to the person in their daily life. Carrots were also used in folk medicine in Scotland, both as a diuretic and as a treatment for gout. People would usually boil carrots and then strain the juice and then drink that strained carrot juice to combat those illnesses. Right, so that's a lot about carrots. That's probably the most information about any of these crops that I have, so yeah. There's more information about certain things than there is about others, at least in terms of their history in Scotland, and carrots there was actually quite a lot. Let's talk about an equally old root vegetable that has a lot less information specific to Scotland around it. Beetroot, or beets, as you might say in North America. Also, as an aside, as someone who is from the US, I know I don't sound it, but I am, I promise, I've always been really curious about why it's called beetroot here in the UK instead of just beets, and I found out that it was originally just called beets here too. So I don't know why it's now really common to call it beetroot instead of beets in the UK. If you happen to know, let me know in the comments. I'm super curious. Anyway, beetroot or beets are a really old crop in Europe. They were first domesticated probably in Western Asia, also originally for their greens, similar to carrots, but eventually people also grew them for the roots. And in the medieval period in Europe, beets were often used to treat blood disorders or digestive illnesses. One wild variety of beets is the sea beet, which grows along parts of Scotland's coasts. It's often also called like a wild spinach, or it's kind of associated with spinach because of the tops. I don't know if you can cook them the same as spinach. I tried to find out and I couldn't find it. So, but yeah, sea beets, they grow all along our shores. Sea beets like shingle beaches, salt marshes, cliffs, sea walls. Really, they like the sea or the coastline. So just take a look around next time you're on a Scottish coast and you might find some sea beets. And that's all the information I have about beets, guys. So compared to carrots, you can see some of these crops we have a lot of information on, and some of them we have relatively little, at least that I could find through the internet. Anyway, let's talk about a crop that is not native to Scotland, but is now one of our main cereal crops. Let's talk about wheat. Now, another important etymology/language thing here. Wheat is often referred to as corn in British English. So let's clear this up right now, okay? Corn, as a word, originally in English just meant grain, and it was used to mean the main cereal crop or the main grain that was grown in an area. So in England, the main cereal crop was wheat, so wheat was often referred to as corn and as wheat. In Scotland, our main crop has been barley for ages and ages and ages. So when Scottish sources or people say the word corn, they might mean wheat, but they probably actually mean barley. And you might have even heard the term barleycorn, which is just a single grain of barley. But North America calls this corn, and I'm pretty sure New Zealand and Australia also call this corn, but yeah, this corn, which is what British English calls sweet corn. This is maize, and it's native to the Americas. Because maize was the main crop in the Americas, the English-speaking groups in the Americas called it corn because it was the main crop there. Since they're different varieties of maize, this one became known as sweet corn because it has such a high sugar content. Now, here's the thing. You know how it was originally beets in British English and then now it's beetroot for some reason? Well, originally in North America, sweet corn was called sweet corn, at least in the 17th century, but we moved away from calling it sweet corn to just calling it corn, at least in the parts of North America that I grew up in. I should say it's also common in the UK to call it corn today, but if you're reading historical sources or something and they're talking about corn, just know that what they mean is the main cereal crop grown in that area. Corn did not arrive in the UK prior to European colonization. So let's get back to wheat, alright? Scotland's climate is not good for wheat varieties that make good bread flour, or really good flour for anything that needs to keep its shape. It's wet and dark and dreary and damp in Scotland, okay? So the varieties of wheat that are good for bread flours and such, they really don't do well in our climate. So instead, our wheat crops tend to be used for animal feed, although some of them are still used for flours and such for things that don't necessarily need to have a structure or keep a shape to them. Now I mentioned barley. Barley is the main crop in Scotland. It's still the main crop in Scotland and it has been for centuries. Actually, even millennia, because I certainly know, at least in the early medieval period, barley was a main cereal crop in Scotland. Today, barley takes up about 3/4 of the total cereal production in the country. In the nation of Scotland, 3/4 of the cereal that we grow are barley. Unfortunately, we don't have barley in Minecraft, at least not outside of modded Minecraft, and wheat is the second largest cereal crop in Scotland anyway, so we're doing a wheat farm instead. And the last crop to talk about today is potatoes. Probably the last crop to arrive, well, the last crop that I'm talking about today to arrive in Scotland. Potatoes are not native to Europe at all. They're native to the Americas. They were originally cultivated in what is now southern Peru and northwestern Bolivia about 7,000 to 10,000 years ago. But they only made it to Europe in the late 16th century after Europeans began colonizing the Americas. That said, today, Europe produces the most potatoes per capita, or the most potatoes per person who lives in Europe, in the world. That doesn't mean that we produce the largest number of potatoes in the world, we just produce the largest number of potatoes per person who lives here in the world. Europeans are fairly obsessed with potatoes. Potatoes were first grown in Scotland in the 18th century, and they became one of the most popular food crops here. They're relatively cheap, they grow well in poor soils, and they're rather nutritious. As I've said before, Scotland has a lot of soil that's pretty poor for growing things, so potatoes became an excellent crop for supplementing people's food options in those areas that didn't have good soil for growing much of anything else. But we cannot talk about potatoes in Scotland without talking about the Highland potato famine. You may have heard of the Great Irish Famine of the 1840s, or the Irish Potato Famine, or the Great Irish Potato Famine. It goes by a lot of different names. What you may not know is that there was also a potato famine in Scotland at the time, and in a lot of the rest of Europe too. The effects in Scotland were a lot less than in Ireland, but it was still a major crisis in the Highlands at the time. In 1845, potato blight appeared in Scotland, and potato blight is a fungus-like microorganism that it eats the potatoes, it destroys the potatoes. In 1846, the potato crop just failed in Scotland, putting about 200,000 people at risk of starvation. That winter was also exceptionally cold and snowy, particularly in the Highlands, and between that and the famine, a lot of lives were lost that winter. Seeing all of this, the Free Church of Scotland tried to combat the famine by providing aid to people in affected communities and by transporting over 3,000 men to work on building railway lines across the country. That not only removed 3,000 people away from famine-affected areas, it also meant that those men were earning money consistently that they could then send home to their families so that their families could now afford to buy food that wasn't potatoes. The Scottish government also stepped in, encouraging and later pressuring landlords to provide relief to the farmers or crofters on their land. Some landlords did, some landlords didn't, and the government eventually threatened those that didn't with selling off their land to make up the cost for relief efforts. There is a lot more to talk about with the Highland potato famine, but we don't have time in this episode today, so I highly recommend researching it yourselves, or, let me know in the comments if you'd like a video about the Highland potato famine. I'm more than happy to put a video towards it at some point in the future. Even though they aren't native to Scotland, potatoes are a big part of Scottish cuisine today, including as our beloved tatty scone, which is basically like a potato pancake sort of bread thing. They also are a famous accompaniment to our national dish of haggis in neeps and tatties, or mashed turnip, which are neeps, and potatoes, which are tatties, as you can tell from tatty scone. But potatoes are also very popular just as roasties, or roast potatoes, or as a jacket potato, which is what we call a baked potato with the skin left on. And that's it! We'll get to setting up the actual farmers market in another episode, which will give me some time to AFK around these farms and get some stock built up, and also figure out what I want to do for things like heather honey, or there's some, I have ideas. So that's gonna happen in a different episode. Thank you for hanging out while I talk about various Scottish crops, everybody. That's all from me for today. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!